Hello and welcome to the second instructional video for the Still Life unit. Today we are continuing in a follow along style practice for the slide value scale. Last time we were working on the step value scale, so if you missed that video, go back one and work on this first. It tells you all the info you need to know before you move on to this next step. It's building those skills. So make sure you've done this part first and that you have gone through with your value scale checker and have made sure that all of your values match. Now we are going to begin on our slide value scale next, and I would like for you to have your lesson guide out, and if you are right-handed, I would like for your lesson guide to be on your left so that while you're working, you are still able to see it. So we are going to get started with layer 1. You can see we're starting with our 6B or 5B. And I'd like for you to begin by sharpening your pencils. Turn very slowly in these sharpeners, and that does make a difference in the way that it sharpens. It doesn't let the lead break as easily. Now, once we have a sharp 6B pencil, we are going to really be thinking about the exact same process that we did for our stepped value scale, but we want to avoid having lines between the sections. We want it to flow really well together. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna add just like a little border for myself. This is kind of like in between the 10 and the 9, and I'm gonna make that border with little circles. And I'm gonna press as hard as I can. I don't want to snap my pencil lead, but I am giving myself a border around value 10. We want to be nice and neat. Fill in those corners. And then we're using small circles and we're filling number 10 in so heavily that it is shiny. So if you lift your paper up, it should be slightly reflective near the window side of the room. We're using just those tiny circles. Remember, we're not using lines, especially up and down lines. That's the worst. So we are working in rows going across of circles. So let's go ahead and continue working on filling value 10. Remember, we don't want to leave any donut holes. That's what I call the little white spot that's left in the circle of the scribble that you've created. So make sure you fill all of those centers and that you don't have any white spots left. All right. Now we are going to continue into value 9, and I am just going to give myself a little indicator line just like halfway through between values 9 and 8, and I'm just going to do that by making a circle line. I'm not making a line, like drawing a line. I'm making a row of circles going across to help me make sure that I know where to stop. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I want to make sure that this is the next value and it's lighter. So I'm going to just make sure that this is not as dark as what was above. And I'm just filling in value 9. I want it to be different from value 10, so I'm using small circles. It's not quite as dark as it's gonna be. That's okay. Now, right now, at this point, it's quite textured. We don't want to have visual texture. So what we're going to do is we're gonna go back over this line that separates the 9 and 10, and I'm gonna add just another layer of circles right there to help bridge the gap. Now for 9, I'm going to go through and look for any donut holes, and I'm just trying to fill those to make it nice and even. And then I'm going to make my border for value 8. I'm using just a row of circles. Now again, I'm trying to get lighter, so I want to make sure that this is a lighter value than what I had above it. And I'm just using small rows of circles, no upward lines. That's going to really be a challenge for you to fix if you start getting back into bad habits. So no lines here, just circles. All right, now we're going to give ourselves our border between 7 and 6. And as we work our way down, we're using just rows of circles. I'm trying to make 7 just a smidge lighter. And I'm starting to work with the flat part of my 6B pencil. As I'm going down this value scale, I'm slowly adding more pressure to my pencil lead, which makes a flat edge. So I'm using that flat pencil edge to make my lighter values here. So I could even hop down to value 5, and this is the lightest that I can color with my 6B pencil. Or not the lightest, but we want it to be like a very, very light pass here. And I'm just using that flat edge of my pencil. And now I'm gonna just kind of bridge the gap. So I want to kind of help these meet somewhere in the middle. Now here's a problem. I want you guys to take a look up at the board. I have my 5 darker than parts of 6. That's one problem that you need to check for. So that indicates that I need to come back up and I need to add more value in the lighter space and bridge that gap between the value above it. So I am just going back through and patch filling. So go ahead and patch fill with me now. We've done values 10 through 5, and we want to just go back and make it have a nice smooth transition. So I'm just adding a little bit more darkness up above to help it have a transition out to this lighter value. I can also compare to my sliding scale, and I can look across and say, is that really that level yet, or do I need to keep adding? Something to remember is that when we come in with our blending stump layer, it really darkens it. So I'll give you a moment to go ahead and get caught up, and then we are going to switch into layer 2 for the blending stump. So let's take a moment, and we're just perfecting. We're just going through and filling any patches so that they look nice and smooth and even. All the way up against the border. Try to stay nice and neat. We're only going to value 5 and then stopping. All right, now let's begin with layer 2. So you can see layer 2 switches you to your blending stump. We are cleaning off the blending stump first to see where we're at. So I'm gonna say, okay, how dark am I? Not too dark, so that's great. We wanna start out with it being kind of lighter. So I'm gonna come in through 5, and I am just blending this value by pressing with little circles kind of heavily into the paper. And I'm gonna work in rows. Now, one mistake students make here is they will use their blending stump and go all the way through it, seeming like that would blend it together, but then you end up with only a few values. We wanna keep that transition nice and slow. So we're going across and working our way in little zigzags, working all the way back up. And I'm using the point of it to try to fill any little gaps. We wanna really push this into the paper so that we don't have that chalkboard texture that's kind of rough. So we're really removing all of the texture here. I'm trying to get rid of the line between 10 and 9. That is quite often noticeable. So take a moment to just kind of go past that and blend it out. All right. Now we are going to continue with layer 2, and we're going to bring it all the way down to value 1 and end by 0. Now I'm gonna just check and see how much graphite I have on my blending stump, and it isn't too much. So I am going to come in at 1, and I'm just gonna make the transition out to 0. Now I just need to bridge the gap with my blending stump. So I'm going to come up to value 4, and I'm just using some of the value that I have on my blending stump, and I'm pressing harder to make more of that value remove itself on the paper. I'm still using small circles, and I'm working in a horizontal row rather than vertical columns. And I'm noticing that I don't quite have enough on my blending stump to reach to value 1. So I'm gonna hop back up here, and I'm going to steal from my middle tones, and I just loaded more graphite onto my blending stump so that I can come back through and continue filling and make sure I have all of those light values present. And again, you can go back up and grab some of the darker value to bring it down if you need to. You can take a moment, if you've got a second, you can erase any spots that you went outside the lines. We want this to be nice and tidy. All right. Now, we are going to switch into layer 3 using a 3B or HB pencil. So let's go ahead and grab either one. And we are going to start by checking our values. So we've got 10, which is just the darkest that we can make. So I like to just go back and refill with my HB to make sure that the texture is nice and smooth. Then I'll check for 9, make sure that it's matching in that circle. And I'm gonna go through and I'm just taking out some of this texture by overlapping with my HB. And it's a much lighter pencil lead, so I can fill without having a bunch of value changes. I'm just changing the texture more than the color. Does that make sense? That's what this layer is for. We're changing the texture to be even smoother, and it's our last chance to value match. So we are gonna go through, and 8 looks pretty good for me. 7 is looking pretty good. I could probably go up against the edges a little bit more here. Now let's check 6. Ooh, 6 is real light on mine, so I'm gonna match that better. And it's just not guesswork, right? We are not guessing here because we have our checking tool. So we want to make sure that it is accurate since we have a way to check. And then we'll check 5. Ooh, I think it could go still a little bit darker there to make it match. And then I'm gonna match that circle all the way through this little box space. Filling all the way up to the edges here. All right, now let's check value 4. I think I could go a smidge darker. And I'm just matching all around that circle to make sure it doesn't stand out. And let's check value 3. Looking pretty good, maybe a smidge darker. It's always better to have to add another little layer than it is to have to erase. So always go lighter than you think you need. All right, check value 2. Looking good. Just a little bit more up against the edge, I'd say, for mine. All right, and there is our last pass on our sliding scale. Now, I would like to talk with you about ways to fix something when you want it to have a really smooth transition. So that is when you would use a kneaded eraser. This is needed to help make sure that you don't have really harsh edges when you erase. So I am going to fill in another space. Let me just add a little bit here so that you can see the difference in erasers. So here is just a little patch, and I'm going to show you the difference in what they do. The sharp eraser, you can take and just erase like a solid line. But see how it gives you that edge that is left behind? And if I went back to like try to fill next to that, sometimes it's hard to make it match. Now, what is really nice when you're adjusting values is to spread out your kneaded eraser and kind of wrap it around your finger, and you can just tap and see how I can lightly erase and like subtly change the value without making a line through it, right? So I can subtly change textures and values just by tapping along. If I have like a really dark spot, I can tap. You just need to be careful not to make more patchwork for yourself. That is a possibility. So be careful not to do it too much, but you can use your kneaded eraser to go back through and adjust your value scales. Now, that was all you needed to do for the practice on the value scale practice page. So if you are finished with this page and you have checked both scales with the value scale finders, the next step is to check it with me. I want to see your paper so that I can double check that you have met the requirements for these these foundational skills before we continue into the next step, which is building those skills and increasing the difficulty. So as soon as you're finished, check it with me, and then you are going to take a photo of this practice and you're going to post it on your unit tracker. And we will talk about that as more students start to finish. So good luck and thank you for following along. I'll see you for our next episode.